The night had been long, full of chaos and gunfire echoing through the rain-soaked alleyways. When she found him, he was bleeding out on her doorstep, a man with eyes sharp as daggers and a voice hoarse from pain. His suit was torn, soaked in crimson, and the smell of gunpowder clung to him like a shadow. "Please, don't call anyone," he rasped, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Elena hesitated only for a moment. Something in his gaze, not fear, not weakness, but pure command, froze her in place. Against every instinct she pulled him inside. Her small apartment became a battlefield clinic that night. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the faint aroma of lavender from her candle. She cut open his shirt, revealing a deep gunshot wound along his ribs. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to move, to stitch, to stop the bleeding. He winced once but never cried out. "Who are you?" she finally whispered. He looked at her, dark eyes unreadable. "You don't want to know." But she already knew. The tattoo on his wrist, a black serpent coiling around a rose, was infamous in the city. It belonged to one man only, Leon Vassari, the most feared Mafia boss in all of Palermo. When she finished bandaging him, he sat in silence, watching her every move. His breathing slowed, and for a fleeting moment, he looked almost human. "Why did you help me?" he asked quietly. Elena shrugged, eyes avoiding his. "Because I couldn't watch someone die on my doorstep." He smiled faintly, a dangerous, almost tender smile. "You just saved the devil, sweetheart." She didn't sleep that night. The moment she turned around, he was gone, leaving only blood-stained bandages and the faint scent of smoke behind. She told herself it was over, that he would disappear from her life as suddenly as he'd come. But the next morning everything changed. The ground trembled as a convoy of black cars screeched to a halt outside her building. Tires burned against the asphalt. Men in suits and masks stepped out, their movements precise, disciplined. The sound of guns being loaded sent shivers through the air. When she peeked through the curtains, her breath caught. There were at least 200 of them, armed, silent, forming a perfect circle around her house. Knock came. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. "Elena!" a familiar voice called from outside. "Open the door." Her knees nearly gave way. She unlocked it, heart racing, and there he stood, clean, sharp, alive. The wounds she had stitched were hidden beneath a tailored black coat. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "I told you," he said calmly, stepping inside as his men remained motionless outside. "You saved the devil. And now the devil owes you." She could hardly speak. "What do you want from me?" He looked around her modest home, as if it were the most fascinating place he'd ever seen. Protection, loyalty, gratitude. He paused, his gaze locking on hers. And perhaps something more. Her pulse quickened. "You can't be serious." Leon stepped closer until she could feel his breath, warm and dangerous, brushing her cheek. "You patched me up with your own hands, Elena. You looked at me when no one else would. Do you think I could forget that?" His voice was low, husky, and filled with something she couldn't name. Not tenderness, not lust, but an aching pull that drew her in against her will. She took a step back, but he followed. His fingers brushed against hers, lightly, almost accidentally. Electricity surged through her veins. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. He leaned closer, his lips just inches from hers. "Then why are you still standing here?" For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The air was charged, thick with danger and something forbidden. Her chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. And then, before she could stop herself, she reached up and pressed her lips against his. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fiery, the kind of kiss that burned away reason. He deepened it, pulling her closer, one hand at the small of her back, the other tangled in her hair. She could taste the faint trace of whiskey on his breath, the heat of his pulse beneath her fingertips. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. He looked at her as if she were the only thing in his universe. You just made it impossible for me to walk away, he murmured. She stared at him, torn between fear and longing. And what happens now? Leon smiled, that same dangerous, devastating smile that could ruin empires. Now, he said softly, you're under my protection, whether you like it or not. Outside, his men still stood in perfect formation, engines idling, awaiting orders. The quiet hum of power surrounded her home. But inside, the silence between them was louder than any gunshot. Elena didn't know if she'd saved a man, or unleashed a storm that would consume her whole world. Yet as his hand brushed her cheek once more, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want him to leave. Not anymore. He moved closer, the air between them vibrating with unspoken words and something dangerously alive. His eyes searched hers, slowly tracing the tremor in her breath, the redness still blooming across her lips. She could feel the weight of his presence. Heavy, magnetic, impossible to escape. Outside, the distant rumble of car engines continued, but inside, time seemed to have stopped. Her world shrank down to the soft rhythm of his breathing and the faint scent of his cologne. Cedar, smoke, and something darker underneath. Elena, he said quietly. His voice a low growl that sent a chill down her spine. You don't understand what you've done. She blinked. I just helped you. No, he shook his head slowly. You crossed a line. You stepped into my world the moment you touched me. And in my world, that means you're not safe anymore. Her heart stuttered. Are you saying someone's after me because of you? He didn't answer. His silence said enough. Leon walked toward the window and pulled the curtain aside. The men outside stood like statues, their eyes scanning the street. He exhaled, tension rippling through his shoulders. They will keep you safe. But they'll also keep you here. She frowned, her voice trembling. Keep me here. You can't just lock me in my own home. He turned to face her, his gaze steady, unyielding. I can. And I will. The words hit her like a slap. She wanted to argue, to scream, but there was something in his tone, something final. For a long moment she stood frozen, until his expression softened slightly. I'm not your enemy, he said. But you've become a part of something you can't walk away from. Her chest tightened. Then tell me what this is, Leon. Who are you really fighting against? He hesitated, and for the first time she saw it, a flicker of weariness behind his eyes. He looked less like a crime lord and more like a man who had seen too much. There's another family, he said at last. They've wanted me dead for years. Last night they almost succeeded. I lost 3 men before I reached your door. If they knew who helped me, they'd come for you too. The words sank into her, heavy and cold. She swallowed hard. So I'm your liability. He stepped closer, shaking his head. No. You're my responsibility. Something in his tone softened her anger. Her breath hitched as his hand rose, hesitant then certain, to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. His touch was light, almost reverent, yet it burned through her skin like fire. You shouldn't have helped me, he murmured. But you did. And now I can't stop thinking about you. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. She wanted to pull away, but the warmth of his touch anchored her in place. Leon, she whispered. He leaned in, his forehead almost touching hers. Say my name again. Her lips parted, trembling. Leon. His breath shuddered against her skin. You have no idea what that does to me. The space between them dissolved. He tilted her chin upward and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. His hand slid down her back, tracing every curve, every shiver. She melted into him, her body responding before her mind could protest. The kiss tasted like danger, like surrender. When they finally broke apart, she could barely breathe. His eyes were darker now, clouded with emotion he seemed to be fighting to control. I shouldn't, he said, voice rough. I can't afford weakness. Then why are you here? She asked softly. He exhaled sharply, as if her question struck something raw inside him. Because when I thought I was dying, it wasn't my empire I saw. It was your face. She stared at him, her pulse racing. He said it with such quiet conviction that for a moment, she forgot the men outside, the guns, the danger. All she saw was him, the man she'd saved, the man now standing inches from her heart. But the moment shattered when a sudden knock thundered at the door. Leon spun, instantly alert. His hand moved to the gun beneath his jacket. The calm in his eyes turned to cold precision. "Stay behind me," he ordered. The knock came again, urgent, impatient. One of his men's voices filtered through the door. "Boss, we've got movement. 2 black sedans, no plates. They're circling the block." Leon's jaw tightened. "How long?" 5 minutes, maybe less." He cursed under his breath, turning to Elena. "You need to pack a bag. Now." "What?" "Well, this is my home. It's not safe anymore." His tone was sharp, but beneath it was something else. Fear, raw and unguarded. "They'll come here first. You're coming with me." Her hand shook. "And if I say no?" His eyes softened, but his voice stayed firm. "Then I'll carry you out myself." For a second they just stood there. 2 worlds colliding in silence. She saw the man beneath the legend, the one who'd lived too long in shadows, who didn't know how to ask for trust. And maybe, just maybe, she saw the part of herself that still believed she could save him. She nodded. "Give me a minute." He watched her disappear into the bedroom. The sound of her hurried footsteps echoed faintly through the small apartment. His heart thudded once hard, something he hadn't felt in years. When she returned, bag slung over her shoulder, he reached out and took her hand without hesitation. The gesture was instinctive, protective. His fingers tightened around hers as he led her toward the door. Outside, headlights cut through the fog. The city was waking, restless and hungry. Somewhere beyond the horizon, war was brewing again, a war that would now drag her into its flames. "Elena," he said as they stepped into the night. His voice low but steady. "Whatever happens next, don't be afraid." She looked up at him, her eyes catching the faint glimmer of streetlight on his jaw. "That's easy for you to say. You've already been to hell." He gave a half-smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Then stay close. I'll make sure you don't have to see it." But even as he said it, the distant growl of engines grew louder, closer, until the entire street seemed to hum with menace. And in that moment, Elena realized, she wasn't walking beside a man. She was walking beside a storm. The roar of engines filled the street like thunder rolling over steel. Leon's grip on her hand tightened as the black sedans came into view, their tinted windows reflecting nothing but the cold morning light. The sound of metal sliding against metal echoed as his men raised their weapons in unison, forming a protective wall in front of the house. "Elena, stay behind me," Leon murmured, his tone calm but lethal. He looked every bit the man she had read about in whispered rumors, the king of the underworld, ruthless, untouchable. But when he glanced back at her, something fragile flickered in his eyes, something human. Her heart pounded. The smell of gasoline, sweat, and tension hung thick in the air. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move. The street was a trap. One wrong step and everything would explode. The first shot shattered the silence. Glass burst from a nearby car window. One of Leon's men ducked, returning fire with military precision. The air turned to chaos. Shouts, bullets, the deafening symphony of war. Leon pulled Elena down behind a black SUV. His arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. She could feel the heat of his body, the sharp rise and fall of his chest. "Are you hit?" he asked. She shook her head, trembling. "No, are you?" He smirked, wiping blood from a small cut on his cheek. "Just a scratch." He peered around the car, eyes calculating, cold. 3 vehicles, 8 men each, he muttered. "They're testing me." trying to draw me out. Before she could answer, a grenade clattered onto the pavement, spinning once before landing near the curb. Leon grabbed her waist and pulled her down, his body covering hers as the explosion tore through the street. The sound was deafening, fire, smoke, and glass raining down like a storm of knives. She felt the force of it in her bones, the world spinning, her ears ringing. When the smoke cleared, she was still alive, because he had shielded her with his own body. His coat was scorched, a thin line of blood trailing down his temple, but his eyes were still blazing with fury and focus. He helped her up, his hands lingering on her arms as if making sure she was real. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice rough. "You don't belong in this world." She looked at him, defiant despite the fear. "Then stop pulling me into it." For a heartbeat, something unreadable crossed his face. Regret, maybe. Then his men shouted, "Boss! They're retreating." Leon turned, gun still in hand, watching as the enemy vehicles sped away, disappearing into the fog. The street fell eerily quiet again. Only the distant echo of sirens remained. He exhaled, holstering his weapon, and signaled his men. "Get the perimeter secured. No one moves without my order." When he finally turned back to her, the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind only exhaustion and something heavier, the realization of how close they had come to death. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "Is this your life? Constant fear and bullets?" He looked away. "It's the only life I've ever known. And now I'm part of it," she whispered. His gaze snapped back to her. "You don't have to be." Her laugh was soft, bitter. "It's too late for that, isn't it?" He took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. "If you stay with me, I can protect you. No one will touch you. Ever." Her breath hitched. "That sounds more like a threat than a promise." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it's both." She didn't answer. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke, and beneath it, his cologne, familiar now, dangerous yet strangely comforting. Her pulse quickened when he reached up, brushing soot from her cheek with his thumb. "You were brave," he said softly. "Most people would have run." "I wanted to," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "But then I saw you get hit, and I couldn't move. I couldn't leave you." Something shifted in his eyes, a crack forming in the armor he'd worn his whole life. He leaned in, his voice low and steady. "You have no idea what that means to me." For a moment, they just stood there, the Mafia boss and the woman who had stitched him back together, surrounded by smoke and silence. And then, without thinking, she reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers instantly, warm, strong. It was such a simple thing, but it grounded them both, a fragile piece in a world built on chaos. "Come with me," he said. "We need to get you somewhere safe." He led her to one of the black cars. The driver opened the door, nodding respectfully before speeding them away from the scene. Through the tinted windows, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. Elena leaned against the seat, her hands still trembling slightly. Leon sat beside her, silent, staring out the window with a haunted expression. After a while, she broke the silence. "Where are we going?" "To one of my safe houses," he replied. "No one will find you there." She hesitated. "And what about you?" His eyes flicked to hers. "I'll be there too." Something in the way he said it made her heart twist. Not fear, but something deeper. He wasn't just protecting her because she saved him. There was more to it, something he wasn't ready to admit. The car turned onto a quiet road lined with tall pines. When they finally stopped, it was in front of a secluded villa overlooking the sea. The moonlight shimmered on the water, silver and calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos they'd just escaped. Inside, the villa was elegant but cold, the kind of place meant for hiding, not living. Leon led her to a room with soft lighting and a view of the ocean. "You can rest here," he said. "No one will disturb you." She turned to him, eyes uncertain. "And you?" "I'll be close," he murmured. But as she watched him turn to leave, something inside her broke. She reached out, catching his hand. "Leon," she whispered. "Stay." He froze, then slowly looked back at her. The air between them thickened again, heavy with everything they hadn't said. He took a step forward, then another, until he was close enough that she could feel his heartbeat beneath the fabric of his shirt. Her breath caught as he reached up, cupping her face. "You don't know what you're asking for," he said softly. "Yes, I do." He hesitated, just for a second, before lowering his head and kissing her. It wasn't violent this time. It was slow, aching, full of everything he'd been holding back. She clutched his shirt, pulling him closer, the taste of salt and warmth blending on her lips. When they finally parted, his voice was barely a whisper. "You've just changed everything." She looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. The fear, the longing, the promise of a war neither of them could escape. But for that moment, in the quiet glow of the moonlight, she didn't care. All that mattered was him. He stood there for a moment, his forehead resting against hers, the world outside forgotten. The ocean whispered softly beyond the glass, its rhythm slow and steady, so different from the pounding of their hearts. Leon's breath was uneven, his pulse betraying the storm he tried to contain. "Elena," he murmured, his thumb tracing her jaw. "You don't understand what this means. Once you're in my life, there's no going back." Her voice was a fragile whisper. "Maybe I don't want to go back." Something flickered in his eyes. Disbelief first, then hunger, and beneath that, a kind of fear. The man who ruled with blood and steel suddenly looked uncertain, undone by the quiet conviction in her words. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. His kiss was soft, reverent, as if he were afraid she might vanish. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," he said quietly. "Then tell me," she breathed. "Tell me what you feel." He hesitated. The air between them grew heavier, each second stretching into eternity. Finally he spoke, low, raw, stripped of the authority he wore like armor. "When I was bleeding out on your floor, I thought it was the end," he said. "I wasn't afraid of dying. I've lived with death long enough to make peace with it. But when you touched me, when I looked at you, it was the first time in years I didn't want to die." Her breath caught, her throat tightening. "Leon." He shook his head, a small, humorless smile tugging at his lips. "You brought me back from the dead. You think I can just walk away from that?" His words hung between them, electric, trembling. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest, fierce and frightening. She knew this was dangerous, every part of it, but she couldn't deny the truth anymore. "I don't want you to walk away," she whispered. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Leon's restraint snapped. He pulled her closer, his mouth finding hers again, this time deeper, hungrier. She melted against him, feeling the strength of his arms, the roughness of his hands, the unspoken promise that he would burn the world down before letting anyone hurt her. The kiss grew more desperate, more consuming. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and his hand slid along her back, tracing the line of her spine until she shivered. The sound of her name on his lips, broken, reverent, made her heart stutter. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Leon rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "You're making me forget who I am." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," she whispered. He opened his eyes, and for once, the cold sharpness was gone. What she saw instead was something almost gentle. He brushed his thumb across her lips, his voice soft. "If I let myself feel this, if I let you stay, they'll come for you. Every enemy I've ever made will use you to destroy me. Then teach me how not to be afraid," she said, her gaze steady. "I won't be your weakness, Leon. I'll be your strength." The words hit him harder than any bullet. He stared at her, silent, his jaw tightening. Then, without another word, he pulled her into his arms. She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heart beating, steady, powerful, alive. For a long time neither spoke. The waves outside crashed softly against the rocks, and the night carried on in quiet defiance of everything that had just happened. Eventually, Leon exhaled, his hand tracing lazy circles along her back. "You don't belong in this life, Elena. You're too good for it." She smiled faintly against his chest. "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." He chuckled under his breath, a sound so rare it made her smile too. But just as quickly, the light faded from his face. He looked toward the window, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" she asked. "Headlights," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Elena turned, her stomach twisting as beams of light cut through the darkness, bouncing off the glass. A car was coming up the long, winding drive. Another followed, and another. Leon stood, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant, the tenderness gone, replaced by cold precision. He reached for his gun, tucking it into the back of his belt. "They found us." Her pulse spiked. "How?" "There's always someone watching," he said grimly. "Stay inside. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Leon, wait." He stopped at the doorway, turning back to her. "If I don't come back in 10 minutes. "Don't say that," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "Don't you dare." He gave her a faint smile, the kind that said he didn't believe in happy endings, but he'd die trying to give her one. 10 minutes, he said, then disappeared into the night. She ran to the window, her hands shaking. Outside, shadows moved between the trees. The distant sound of engines roared louder, closer. Then came the first gunshot. Elena flinched, pressing her hand to her mouth. The night erupted into chaos. Flashes of light, the sharp crack of bullets, men shouting commands. She could make out Leon's voice, low and commanding, somewhere near the front gate. Her heart pounded in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to stay where she was, but the thought of him out there, alone, outnumbered, burned through her fear. She grabbed the small knife from the kitchen drawer and pushed open the door. The wind hit her face, cold and sharp. The smell of gunpowder stung her nose. "Leon!" she shouted. A shadow moved to her right, one of Leon's men, clutching his shoulder. "Get back inside," he yelled. "Boss said." But before he could finish, a bullet hit him, sending him crashing to the ground. Elena gasped, ducking behind a stone wall as chaos raged around her. Somewhere in the smoke she saw Leon, firing, moving like a ghost through the shadows, every motion precise, lethal. He turned, eyes locking on hers for a split second, and his expression changed from fury to pure fear. "Elena!" he roared. "Get down!" A figure emerged behind her, gun raised. Before she could react, Leon was there, slamming into the man, knocking the weapon away. The two struggled, the sound of fists and grunts mixing with the relentless storm of gunfire. Elena froze, unable to breathe. Then the man fell, lifeless, and Leon turned back to her. His face was streaked with blood and ash, his breathing ragged. He grabbed her shoulders, eyes blazing. "I told you to stay inside." "I couldn't," she cried, tears streaking down her face. "I thought you were." He silenced her with a kiss, quick, fierce, desperate. When he pulled back, his voice trembled for the first time. "Don't ever scare me like that again." The chaos continued around them, but in that moment, everything else vanished. The world could burn, and neither would have noticed. Then a sound split the air, the scream of tires, the flash of headlights turning toward them. Leon spun, gun raised, ready to fight again. "Elena," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "No matter what happens next, remember this, I'll always find you." And before she could answer, the next wave of attackers came crashing through the gate. The screech of tires ripped through the night as bullets tore across the courtyard like flashes of lightning. Leon pushed Elena behind the stone pillar, his body shielding hers as shards of rock exploded around them. The metallic scent of gunfire filled the air, thick and suffocating. She could feel the vibration of every shot against her bones, each one a reminder of how close death was. Leon moved like a predator, controlled, deliberate, deadly. He fired twice, dropped to one knee, and shot again. 2 men went down, the others scattering for cover. His men returned fire from behind the cars, their voices cutting through the chaos. "Cover the left flank. Boss, they're circling from the east." Leon's jaw tightened. "No one gets past the gate," he shouted. Elena gripped the edge of the pillar, her knuckles white. Every sound blurred together. Gunfire, engines, shouts, until it all became one terrible rhythm. She wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't look away. Every time Leon moved, her heart stopped. A shadow broke from the tree-line, a man with a rifle, aiming straight at Leon. "Leon!" she screamed. He spun at the sound of her voice just as the gun went off. The bullet grazed his arm, cutting through his sleeve. He didn't even flinch. With lightning reflexes, he fired back, hitting the shooter square in the chest. The man fell soundlessly into the grass. Leon turned toward her, eyes blazing. "I told you to stay down. I can't just watch you die," she shouted back, her voice shaking. His glare softened, only for a second, before another explosion shook the ground. One of the enemy cars burst into flames, the heat washing over them. Smoke billowed upward, thick and black. Leon grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the side entrance of the villa. "Move," he barked. They ran through the courtyard, ducking behind marble columns as bullets whistled past. Elena stumbled once, her knee scraping against the stone, but Leon was there instantly, his arm steady around her waist. Inside, the villa was a maze of shadows and broken light. Leon led her through narrow halls, his gun always raised, his movements precise and silent. Every so often he'd glance over his shoulder, his expression a mixture of fury and something else. Fear maybe, though he'd never admit it. When they reached a heavy steel door at the end of the corridor, he pressed a code into the panel. The door clicked open, revealing a dimly lit staircase spiraling downward. "Go," he said. "What is this?" "Safe room," he replied. "No windows, reinforced walls. Stay there until I say it's clear." She hesitated, her chest heaving. "And you?" He met her eyes. "I'm not hiding. Leon, please." He reached up, his blood-stained hand brushing her cheek. "You saved me once," he said quietly. "Now let me return the favor." Before she could respond, he kissed her again, quick, fierce, full of everything he didn't have time to say. Then he turned and vanished back into the chaos. Elena stood frozen, the sound of gunfire echoing through the halls. Every instinct screamed to run, but her feet refused to move. Her mind flashed with every memory of his touch, his voice, his promise, "I'll always find you." She clenched her fists, forcing herself down the stairs. The air in the safe room was cold and stale. There was a single light above, flickering faintly, and a monitor displaying the exterior security feeds. She watched the screens, heart pounding, as the fight raged on. Leon moved like a shadow across the courtyard, ducking behind cover, taking down attackers with brutal precision. But there were too many of them. She saw one of his men fall, then another. The gate burst open as a new wave of enemies flooded in. "Leon," she whispered, pressing her fingers to the screen. "Please be careful." Suddenly the feed flickered, static, then black. "No, no, no," she gasped, slamming her hand against the monitor. The lights overhead dimmed. The hum of the generator faltered. And then, through the heavy steel door, she heard footsteps. Low, deliberate. Her breath caught. "Leon," she called out softly. No answer. The footsteps drew closer, echoing against the stone floor. Then, a metallic clang. Someone was trying to force the door open. She looked around the room desperately. There was nothing but the monitor, a metal table, and a shelf of supplies. Her eyes landed on a small pistol lying beside the control panel. She hesitated only for a moment before picking it up. Her hands trembled, but she aimed it at the door. The sound came again, louder this time. The lock screeched under pressure. And then silence. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The seconds stretched on endlessly. "Elena," a voice said through the door. Her heart leapt, it was him. She rushed forward, pressing her ear against the steel. "Leon." But before she could open the lock, the voice spoke again. Lower, colder. "You think he can protect you?" Her blood ran cold. It wasn't Leon. The door shuddered violently as something slammed against it. She stumbled back, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. The gun felt too heavy in her hand, her palms slick with sweat. Another blow, then another. The hinges groaned. And then silence again. "Elena." The real Leon's voice came from somewhere behind the door, fierce, breathless. "Step back." A second later, an explosion ripped the door off its hinges. The blast threw her to the ground. Smoke filled the air as Leon burst through the wreckage, gun in hand. His coat was torn, his face streaked with blood and dust. He grabbed her and pulled her into his arms. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, clutching at his shirt. I thought it wasn't you." He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "It wasn't. But it's over now." A shadow moved in the smoke behind him. "Leon," she screamed. He turned just as the attacker lunged. The two men crashed into the wall, struggling for control. The gun went off once, twice. Elena's scream echoed through the chamber. The world tilted, the sound of the sea distant and hollow. Leon staggered, his hand pressed to his side, crimson blooming through his shirt. The other man collapsed beside him, lifeless. "No," she whispered, crawling toward him. "No, no, no." Leon's breath came shallow and ragged. He tried to smile, his hand reaching weakly for hers. "You see," he murmured, his voice barely there. "I told you. I'd find you." Tears streamed down her face as she pressed her hand over his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "You're not going to die," she said fiercely. "Not this time." He winced, but his eyes softened. "You're stubborn." "Good," she said, choking on her words. "Because I'm not losing you." He reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek again. "Elena, save your strength," she pleaded. "Please." He smiled faintly, his thumb smudging a tear from her skin. "You are the only thing that ever made me want to live right." And before she could answer, his hand went limp in hers. Elena froze. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against Leon's wound, but his body had gone frighteningly still. The silence in the room was unbearable, only the faint hum of the emergency light flickering above, casting pale shadows across his face. "Leon!" she shouted, shaking him. "Leon, open your eyes." No response. His lips were slightly parted, his breathing faint to the point of disappearing. She felt her throat tighten, panic clawing its way through her chest. She pressed harder on his wound, tears falling onto his shirt, mixing with the blood that kept seeping through her fingers. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered hoarsely. "You promised me." Her mind raced. She had seen medical supplies earlier, somewhere on the shelf. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling through the smoke-filled air. Her fingers searched through boxes until they found a first aid kit. She ripped it open, hands shaking uncontrollably, fumbling with the bandages. When she pressed the gauze against his side, Leon's body jerked slightly. A shallow groan escaped his lips. "Leon!" she gasped, leaning closer. "Stay with me, please." His eyes fluttered open, dazed and unfocused. "You should have run," he managed to whisper. "I'm not leaving you," she said through clenched teeth, tying the bandage tight. "We're getting out of here together." He tried to move, but pain shot through him, making him gasp. "There's a tunnel," he murmured. "Behind the panel, left wall." Elena looked up and saw a faint outline of a metal panel, half hidden behind debris. She ran to it, dragging aside the broken pieces of concrete until she found the latch. She yanked it open and felt a rush of cold air. A narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. She returned to Leon, kneeling beside him. "We can make it," she said. "You just have to hold on." He tried to smile, but it came out weak and strained. "You're insane." "Then you'll fit right in," she said, slipping her arm under his shoulders. "Now come on." He groaned as she helped him up. His weight nearly toppled her, but she steadied herself, clutching him tightly. Every step they took left a trail of blood behind. The tunnel's air was damp and heavy, the walls cold to the touch. Elena's breath came hard and fast as she guided him forward. "Just a little more," she whispered, though she didn't know how long the tunnel really was. Leon's head rested against her shoulder. His voice faint. "You should have never come back." "If I hadn't," she said, blinking back tears, "you'd be dead already." He gave a soft, broken laugh that turned into a cough. "Still might be. Not if I can help it." The tunnel twisted and sloped downward. Somewhere above, the sound of gunfire had stopped, replaced by eerie silence. The further they went, the colder it became. Elena's muscles burned from the effort, but she didn't stop. After what felt like forever, a dim light appeared ahead. She pushed forward, hope flickering inside her chest. When they reached the end, she found a rusted door with a wheel lock. She turned it with all her strength, gritting her teeth as it creaked open. The night air hit them like a wave. They stumbled out into the woods behind the villa. The stars were hidden behind clouds, the smell of smoke still lingering from the burning cars in the distance. Elena eased Leon against a tree, brushing the hair from his face. "We did it," she whispered. "We're out." Leon looked up at her. His eyes glassy but filled with something soft. "You never listen." "Not to stupid orders," she shot back, a shaky smile tugging at her lips. He reached for her hand, gripping it weakly. "You've got fire." "Then don't let it go out," she said quietly. A low rumble of engines echoed from somewhere nearby. Her smile faded. She turned toward the sound, eyes narrowing. Headlights flickered between the trees. Vehicles moving fast. "They're still coming," she whispered. Leon tried to sit up. "You need to go. Now." "No," she said fiercely. "We stay together." "Elena." "Don't," she snapped, tears welling again. "You always think you have to protect me. But I'm the one protecting you now." He exhaled slowly, his resistance fading. "You're stubborn as hell." "Good," she said. "It's what's keeping us alive." She helped him to his feet again, and together they stumbled deeper into the forest. The path ahead was uneven, roots twisting underfoot, but she didn't care. All that mattered was getting away. Far enough that no one could ever find them again. Branches scraped her arms, leaves tangled in her hair. Leon's weight dragged her down, but she refused to stop. Then in the distance a faint glow appeared, an abandoned cabin, its roof half collapsed but still standing. Elena guided him inside and eased him onto the floor. She tore her sleeve and wiped the blood from his face. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "You have to be." He reached for her hand again, his fingers cold. "If I don't make it." "Don't say that." "Listen to me," he said weakly, his eyes locking onto hers. "There's a flash drive. In my jacket. Everything, the reason they came for me. You need to take it." She reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black drive. "What's on it?" "The truth," he said, his breath shallow. "Names. Money. Betrayal. They'll never stop until it's gone. Then we destroy it," she said. He shook his head faintly. "No. The world needs to see it." Elena looked at him in disbelief. "Leon, you're bleeding out, and you're still thinking about saving the world?" He gave a faint smirk. "Old habits die hard." She let out a broken laugh and pressed her forehead to his. "You're impossible. And you," he murmured, "are the best thing that ever happened to me." She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder again. They didn't have much time. Elena stood, scanning the cabin for anything useful. Old tools, a can of fuel, a back exit. Her mind was spinning, her heart pounding, but her purpose had never been clearer. When she turned back, Leon was watching her, his expression unreadable. "If you get the chance," he whispered, "run. Don't look back." She walked to him, kneeling beside his battered body. "No," she said quietly. "I'm done running." She reached for his gun, checked the magazine, and stood facing the broken window. The headlights were closer now, cutting through the trees like hungry eyes. Her grip tightened around the weapon. She turned to him one last time. "If they want a fight," she said, voice steady despite the fear clawing inside her, "they picked the wrong woman." Leon managed a faint smile. Pride, love, pain all tangled together. Outside, the first shot rang out. Elena didn't flinch. She raised her gun and stepped into the doorway, her silhouette outlined by the burning light of the forest beyond. And in that moment, she wasn't afraid anymore. The echo of gunfire ripped through the night, scattering birds into the dark sky. The forest burned orange in the distance, and Elena's pulse thundered in her ears as she fired back toward the oncoming headlights. The recoil jolted her shoulder, but she didn't stop. Each bullet she fired was desperate, precise, a promise that no one would touch him again. "Two on the left," Leon shouted weakly from the floor, his voice hoarse. She adjusted her aim, squeezed the trigger twice, and saw shadows fall. Her hands trembled, sweat and smoke clinging to her skin. The men kept coming. Their boots pounded against the earth, their shouts slicing through the cold air. She ducked behind the doorframe as a bullet shattered the wood near her face. Splinters grazed her cheek, but she didn't feel the pain. She was too full of adrenaline, too full of something fierce and wild that she hadn't known lived inside her. "Leon," she gasped, turning back to him. "Can you move?" He tried, but his hand slipped in his own blood. "Not far. Then I'll get you out another way." She spotted a small window at the back of the cabin. It was cracked but large enough for him to fit through. She raced over, pushing aside broken boards and glass. Then she returned to him, sliding his arm over her shoulder again. "You're bleeding too much," she said, her voice breaking. He gritted his teeth. "I've had worse. Don't be a hero." He gave her a faint, almost teasing smile. Too late. She dragged him toward the back, every step a battle. Bullets punched holes through the walls, showering them with dust. The air filled with the scent of metal and smoke. As she helped him through the window, a sharp cry tore from her throat. Pain exploded through her side. She looked down. A bullet had grazed her ribs, cutting deep enough to sting. Leon saw the blood immediately. His expression twisted in horror. "Elena." "I'm fine," she lied, pushing him through the frame. "Go." But he didn't go. He turned back, his hand clutching hers. "Not without you. Leon, please. Now you listen to me for once," he said, voice hard despite the pain. "If one of us stays behind, it's going to be me." She shook her head violently, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. "No. I didn't fight this far to lose you now." Before he could argue, she shoved him out the rest of the way and climbed after him, ignoring the throbbing in her side. They tumbled into the wet grass outside just as more bullets tore through the cabin walls. The night swallowed them whole. Elena gasped for air, her vision swimming. The forest loomed like a labyrinth around them, dark and endless. She could hear voices shouting behind, the enemy closing in. Leon grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the trees. "Come on." They ran, half stumbling, half collapsing with every step. Branches whipped their faces, roots caught their feet, but they didn't stop. Not until the roar of engines faded into the distance. Finally, when her legs could no longer move, Elena fell to her knees beside a fallen log. The world tilted. She pressed a trembling hand to her wound and felt the warmth of blood soaking her shirt. Leon knelt beside her, his breath ragged. He tore a piece of fabric from his sleeve and pressed it against her side. "You're losing too much." She forced a weak laugh. "Guess we're even now." His jaw clenched. "Don't joke. Not about this." Her fingers brushed his cheek, smearing blood across his skin. "You look scared, Leon." "I am." His voice cracked, low and raw. "For the first time in years. I am." He took her hand, pressing it to his chest, right over his heartbeat. It was weak but steady. "I've seen people die every day. But the thought of losing you." His words caught in his throat. "It's different." She leaned closer, her face inches from his. "Then don't let me go." He hesitated for just a heartbeat before pulling her against him, holding her like something fragile yet irreplaceable. The world around them faded, the cold, the smoke, the chaos. For that brief moment it was only them. His lips brushed hers gently at first, uncertain, as though he feared she might vanish if he held on too tightly. But when she didn't pull away, the kiss deepened, urgent and trembling, filled with everything they hadn't said. Fear, need, relief. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his, their breaths mingling in the cold night air. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I'm not the only one," she murmured. He gave a weak laugh, though pain flickered across his face. "If my men could see me now, they'd never let me live it down." "They'd have to catch you first," she said softly, her hand still resting on his chest. For a few precious seconds, they forgot the danger surrounding them. But the world refused to stay quiet. In the distance, dogs began to bark. Flashlights cut through the darkness, moving closer. Leon stiffened. They found the trail. Elena turned toward the lights. "Then we move again." "You can't," he said firmly. "You're hurt." "So are you," she countered, rising to her feet despite the agony lancing through her side. "We don't have a choice." He stared at her, torn between anger and admiration. Then he nodded. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens, don't stop." They moved deeper into the forest, using the shadows as cover. The moonlight slipped through the branches, silver and cold. Every sound made Elena flinch, a rustle of leaves, the crack of twigs beneath their boots, the distant hum of pursuit. But through it all, Leon's hand never left hers. His grip was steady, grounding her in the madness. After what felt like hours, they stumbled into a clearing. A river shimmered faintly under the moonlight, fast and deep. Leon scanned the bank, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. "If we follow the current, it leads to the coast. My men might still have a safe house there." Elena looked at the rushing water. "We'll never make it walking." He turned to her. "Then we don't walk." Before she could respond, he stepped into the river, wincing at the icy shock. He turned and reached out his hand to her. She hesitated. "Leon, trust me," he said simply. And she did. Without another word, she took his hand and stepped into the current. The cold stole her breath, but Leon's arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her. Together, they waded deeper until the current began to pull them along. The forest behind them blurred, fading into darkness. They let the river carry them away from the chaos, from the gunfire, the smoke, the burning past that refused to die. Elena clung to him as the water rushed around them, her body numb, her mind spinning. Somewhere ahead the world waited, uncertain, dangerous but alive. Leon pressed his lips against her temple, his whisper barely audible over the roar of the water. "I told you not to save me," he said. She smiled weakly against his shoulder. "Then stop giving me reasons to." His laugh was soft, almost lost to the river, but it was the sound of something human, fragile, fleeting and real. And as the current swept them further into the night, the only thing she knew for certain was that she would never let go. The water roared around them, pulling them through the darkness like two shadows clinging to life. The current was merciless, cold enough to numb their limbs, wild enough to make breathing feel impossible. But still they held on to each other. Leon's arm tightened around her waist, his body straining to keep her head above the surface. "Almost there," he gasped, though his voice was raw, trembling. Elena could barely see. The moonlight broke through the clouds in fleeting glimmers, illuminating his face, pale, streaked with blood and river water. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, weak but still there. It was the only thing that kept her from giving in to the pull of the river. Her fingers clawed at the current until they found something solid, the root of a fallen tree jutting out from the bank. She gripped it desperately. "Leon here." He nodded, fighting the flow, his breath ragged. Together they dragged themselves toward the shore, every movement a battle against exhaustion. The moment her feet touched the muddy edge, she collapsed, gasping. Leon fell beside her, his chest heaving, his clothes drenched and heavy. For a while neither of them spoke. The forest was silent except for the rushing of the river and the faint whisper of wind through the trees. Elena rolled onto her side, watching him. The moon caught his profile. Sharp jaw, wet hair plastered to his forehead, lips slightly parted as he tried to catch his breath. Even beaten and broken, there was something magnetic about him. Something untamed. "You're insane," she whispered between breaths. He turned his head toward her, managing a faint grin. "You say that, like it's new information." Despite everything, the pain, the blood, the cold, she laughed. It was small and breathless, but it was real. Her laughter made him smile wider. But then the smile faded. He sat up slowly, grimacing as pain shot through his side. His bandage had loosened, and dark stains spread across the fabric. "Leon, I'm fine." He cut her off, though his voice was tight. "You're not." She crawled closer, pulling her torn sleeve tighter around the wound. "You're losing too much blood. If we don't find help soon." He caught her wrist, his touch gentle but firm. "No hospitals. Not now. They'll find us the moment we show up on a camera. Then what? You just bleed out in the woods." He looked at her with something unreadable, a strange mix of defiance and tenderness. "I've survived worse." Her throat tightened. "You keep saying that. But this time you're not alone." He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to memorize her face. Then, slowly, his expression softened. His hand brushed against her cheek, thumb tracing away a streak of mud. "You shouldn't have stayed," he murmured. "You could have run. You still can." "I told you," she said quietly. "I don't run from people I care about." The words hung between them, fragile, dangerous. His gaze darkened, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between their faces. His breath mingled with hers, warm despite the cold. "Careful," he said softly. "You're playing with fire. Maybe I like the heat." His lips twitched, and before she could breathe again, he leaned in. The kiss was slow this time, not desperate like before, but heavy with everything left unsaid. His fingers slid into her hair, his other hand finding her waist. The taste of river water and fear lingered on their lips, but underneath it was something real, something that made her forget the pain, the danger, the world. When they finally pulled apart, the forest felt quieter. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. He smirked faintly. "You kissed me back." She smiled despite herself. "You're impossible." "And you," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "are the first thing that's made sense in years." Her chest tightened at his words, a warmth blooming where fear had lived for so long. But before she could reply, a sharp crack echoed in the distance, the unmistakable sound of a branch snapping under a boot. Her head jerked toward the sound. Leon immediately reached for his gun, pulling her behind him. "They're close," he whispered. "Too close." Elena's heart pounded. "How do they keep finding us?" "There's a tracker," he muttered, checking his weapon. "They must have planted it before the ambush. Maybe on me. Maybe on you." She stared at him in horror. "Then get rid of it." He ripped open the inner lining of his jacket, searching until his fingers found a tiny blinking light sewn near the seam. He tore it out and crushed it under his boot. "Too late," he said. "They already know the area." Elena glanced around, panic threatening to take hold. "Then what do we do?" Leon's eyes flicked toward the river. "We keep moving. They'll expect us to head inland, not back into the water. Her jaw dropped. Leon, we just barely made it out alive. He stepped closer, his hand cupping the side of her face. I know. But if they catch us here, neither of us makes it out again. She stared into his eyes. Dark, determined, unbreakable. Then she nodded. All right. Lead the way. They moved quickly, keeping low as they followed the river downstream. The mud sucked at their boots, the air thick with moisture and tension. Behind them, faint voices echoed through the trees. Closer now, too close. Leon tightened his grip on her hand. Run. They ran again, branches clawing at their clothes, breath burning in their lungs. The world became a blur of silver light and shadow. At one point, Elena stumbled, and Leon caught her before she fell. Their eyes met briefly, a flash of connection even in the chaos. Don't stop, he whispered. She nodded, pushing forward, matching his pace even though every muscle screamed. Then, through the trees, she saw it. A small dock jutting into the river, half hidden by overgrown reeds. A single boat floated there, tied loosely to a post. Leon's eyes locked onto it. There. They sprinted the last few meters. Leon untied the rope, helping her climb in before collapsing beside her. With the last of his strength, he pushed the boat off the dock and let the current take them. Gunshots rang out behind them, bullets slicing through the air and splashing into the water. Elena ducked, pressing against him as he fired back once, twice, until the shouts faded. The boat drifted into the fog, carried by the river's endless pull. Elena's hands were still trembling. She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. Where does this lead? Leon's gaze stayed on the dark water ahead. If we're lucky, freedom. If not. She touched his hand, stopping him. Then we make our own luck. He looked at her, his expression softening. You really don't give up, do you? Not on you, she said simply. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached over, took her hand and kissed it gently. The night swallowed their boat as it drifted down the unseen path, two fugitives bound by blood, fire, and something neither of them could name. And somewhere behind the fog, the men who wanted them dead were still coming. The fog thickened as the boat drifted deeper into the unknown. The river had widened, its dark surface glistening under the faint light of the moon. Every sound, the creak of the wooden hull, the distant splash of water, felt louder in the silence that surrounded them. Elena sat close to Leon, her body pressed against his for warmth, though she could feel the tension coiled inside him like a storm waiting to break. His shirt was soaked, clinging to his chest, the bloodstains spreading slowly with each heartbeat. She tore a piece from her own sleeve and pressed it gently against his wound again. He flinched but didn't pull away. You're still bleeding, she whispered. I told you, he murmured, his voice low and hoarse. I've had worse. You keep saying that, she said, eyes narrowing. But if you die, I swear I'll. He turned to her, his lips curving faintly. You'll what? Haunt me. Her glare softened, replaced by something else. Fear, affection, helplessness. I'll never forgive you, she said quietly, for making me care this much. He stared at her, the teasing in his eyes fading. For a long moment, he said nothing, only reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. You shouldn't, he said. I'm not worth that. Elena's voice trembled. Don't tell me what's worth it. The air between them thickened. The boat rocked gently, the world beyond the mist fading into nothing. It was as if they were the last two people left alive. Leon's eyes met hers, dark, haunted, full of something unspoken. Slowly he leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. I wish I met you before all this, he whispered. You can still start over, she said. We both can. He gave a quiet, bitter laugh. Men like me don't get to start over. We just run until someone catches up. She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. Then I'll make sure no one ever does. He blinked, as if her words reached somewhere deep he'd long buried. You'd fight the world for me. I already am, she whispered. Before he could speak again, the sound of something heavy splashing in the water broke the stillness. Leon stiffened instantly, his hand reaching for his gun. He scanned the fog, eyes sharp, body tense. Elena, he murmured, stay low. She crouched beside him, gripping the edge of the boat. What is it? He listened, every muscle alert, every breath calculated. Then, from the mist ahead, came the faint hum of an engine. A small motorboat was approaching, its light faint but growing brighter. They found us, he said under his breath. Elena's heart dropped. How? We destroyed the tracker. They don't need one, he said grimly. They're hunting the river. They know I'd take this route. He cocked the gun, the click echoing like thunder in the still air. When I tell you to jump, you swim. Don't argue. Her eyes widened. Leon. No. His tone hardened, the command of a man used to being obeyed. You don't look back. You don't wait for me. You just go. Her throat burned. I'm not leaving you again. You will if you want to live. The motorboat's light pierced through the fog now, close enough for her to see silhouettes, armed men standing on deck. She counted at least 4. One raised a flashlight that swept across the water, nearly catching them in its beam. Leon crouched, whispering, "Get ready." But before either of them could move, another sound cut through the chaos, the soft hum of a second boat, coming from the opposite direction. Leon froze. His eyes darted between the two sets of lights now closing in from both sides. "They've boxed us in," he said quietly. Panic surged through Elena. "What do we do?" Leon exhaled, steady but grim. "We make them believe we're already dead." He reached behind him, grabbing a small metal canister from his belt, a smoke grenade, dented but intact. He yanked the pin with his teeth and dropped it into the water. Within seconds, a thick plume of gray smoke erupted, swallowing them whole. "Now!" he hissed. They leapt into the freezing river, the cold slicing through her body like knives. She gasped, the shock stealing her breath, but Leon's arm wrapped around her instantly, pulling her under before the enemy's flashlights could cut through the fog. The water was black, bottomless. She clung to him as they drifted beneath the current, bubbles rising around them. Her lungs screamed for air, her heartbeat deafening in her ears. Just as she thought she couldn't hold on, Leon pulled her upward, breaking through the surface several meters downstream. They gasped together, the smoke still cloaking them like a shroud. Leon dragged her toward the reeds near the bank, his movements weak but determined. They hid among the tall grass, the boat's engines roaring somewhere upstream. Flashlights swept the water, searching. "Nothing," one man shouted. "They must have drowned." Another voice, colder, older, answered. "No body, no confirmation. Keep looking." The engines roared again, but slowly, the sound drifted away into the distance. Elena collapsed against Leon, chest heaving, every inch of her body shaking. His arm stayed around her, his breath warm against her hair. "They're gone," she whispered. "For now," he said quietly. The night pressed down on them again, heavy and silent. The smell of smoke and water filled the air. Elena lifted her head, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. His face was pale, lips slightly blue, but his gaze was still sharp, alive. "You saved us," she said softly. He shook his head. "You saved me first." She smiled faintly, tracing his jaw with trembling fingers. "So we're even now." He caught her hand, holding it against his chest. "Not even close." She leaned closer until their foreheads touched again. For the first time there was no rush, no panic, just quiet, raw closeness. His thumb brushed over her lips, slow and deliberate. "I keep trying to push you away," he murmured, "but every time you pull me back. Maybe it's because you don't really want to go." He gave a tired smile, the kind that held too much truth. "Maybe." Then, faintly, the sky began to lighten. A thin line of dawn stretched over the horizon, painting the river in shades of gray and gold. Elena rested her head against his shoulder, watching it. "Morning," she said softly. "We made it through another night." Leon exhaled, his voice almost a whisper. "Don't get too comfortable. The mornings when they start hunting again." She tilted her head up, meeting his gaze. "Then we keep moving. Together." He looked at her for a long moment, as if searching for something he'd lost long ago. "You really think you can live with a man like me?" She didn't hesitate. "I already am." His lips curved into the smallest smile. "You have no idea what you're walking into." "Then show me," she said. "All of it." The fog drifted slowly away, revealing a path through the trees just beyond the riverbank. Leon's hand tightened around hers, steady and warm. He rose, wincing, and pulled her up beside him. The forest ahead looked endless, dangerous, but for the first time neither of them turned back. The world behind them was ashes. The world ahead was war. And in the fragile space between those two things, they began to walk, bloodied, hunted, but unbroken. The forest was damp and eerily quiet. Every step they took sent faint echoes of crunching leaves and snapping twigs into the heavy morning air. The fog was thinning now, replaced by streaks of early sunlight cutting through the branches like blades. Elena's hand stayed in Leon's as they walked, her fingers cold, but her grip unrelenting. He limped slightly, every movement reminding her of the bullet wound in his side. She could see the dark patch spreading beneath his shirt again, the fabric clinging wetly to his skin. "Leon," she whispered, "you need to rest." "We can't stop here," he said through gritted teeth. "If they're tracking us, this is exactly where they'll look first. We need higher ground. Then at least let me check the wound." He cut her off, his tone sharp but not unkind. "Later." But when he stumbled against a tree, his breath catching in pain, she ignored his words and moved in front of him. "Now," she said firmly. "Sit." Leon hesitated, then gave a short exhale, half frustration, half surrender, and slid down against the trunk of a pine tree. His head fell back, eyes closing for a moment as he tried to steady his breathing. Elena knelt beside him, tearing another strip from her skirt and pressing it gently against the wound. The smell of iron filled the air. Her fingers trembled, but her movements were sure, practiced, the muscle memory of a nurse who'd once saved lives in quieter times. He watched her silently, his gaze heavy, tracing every line of her face. "You shouldn't have followed me," he murmured. "You had a life, a chance to walk away." She didn't look up. "You think I could just go back? Pretend none of this happened?" He gave a faint, humorless laugh. "People have done worse for less. I'm not people, Leon." That made him open his eyes fully. There was fire in hers, a kind of stubborn loyalty that both terrified and mesmerized him. He reached out, fingers brushing against her wrist. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." For a long moment they didn't speak. Only the rustling of the trees and the faraway cry of a bird filled the silence. Her pulse was racing under his touch. When she looked up, her eyes softened. "You've been fighting alone for too long," she whispered. "Because that's how men like me survive. Then let me change that." He smiled faintly, but it was a smile wrapped in sorrow. "You can't save me, Elena." She leaned closer, her voice trembling but steady. "Then let me try." Their faces were inches apart now. The world around them blurred, the trees, the morning light, the danger. His breath mingled with hers, slow and uneven. For the first time since she met him, his defenses cracked, and she saw the man beneath the mask, wounded, tired, human. Her hand slid up to his jaw, fingers brushing against the stubble on his skin. He didn't move away. Instead, his hand came up to rest on her waist, his thumb drawing slow circles through the fabric of her shirt. "Elena." His voice was low, a whisper tangled between warning and want. "Don't say it," she breathed. "Just let it be real for once." And then he kissed her. It wasn't soft, nor was it gentle. It was desperate, two broken souls clinging to the one moment that still felt alive. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and for a few heartbeats the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads stayed pressed together, both of them breathless. He was the first to speak. "You have no idea what you've done," he said, half smiling, half tortured. "I know exactly what I've done," she whispered. "And I'd do it again." He laughed quietly, though there was no joy in it. "You're going to destroy me." "Maybe," she said softly. "Or maybe I'll save you." The sound of distant engines shattered the fragile calm. Leon's eyes snapped open, his instincts flaring. He turned his head toward the north. Faint but unmistakable, the rumble of approaching vehicles. "They found the road," he said. "We have to move." He tried to stand, but his leg gave out. She caught him before he fell. "Lean on me," she said. "I'm not." "Do it," she interrupted sharply. "No arguments." He gave her a long, exasperated look, then relented, slinging his arm over her shoulders. They moved slowly through the underbrush, each step heavy but determined. The forest thickened again, swallowing them in its shadows. As they climbed, the terrain grew steeper, and the ground gave way to rocks and tangled roots. Elena's legs burned, but she refused to stop. Leon's breathing was shallow now, his strength fading. Finally, they reached a small clearing, an old cabin half hidden under vines and moss. Its wooden walls were cracked, the door hanging loosely on one hinge. Leon frowned. "This place. You've been here before?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Years ago. It used to be one of ours. A safe house. Back before everything went to hell." She pushed the door open and they stepped inside. Dust hung in the air, and the faint scent of decay lingered. A few broken chairs, an old table, and a fireplace stood in the corner. Elena helped him lower onto the floor near the hearth. She found an old tin box with matches inside and began to build a small fire. The warmth spread slowly, painting the room in flickering gold. Leon leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed. "Why are you still here?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean? You could have left that night. When my men came. You had every chance." She hesitated, then said simply, "Because the man I saw bleeding in my kitchen wasn't a monster. He was human. And I couldn't walk away from that." He stared into the fire for a long moment, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "You're wrong," he said finally. "I've done things that can't be forgiven." "Then let me be the one who forgives them," she said. The words hit him harder than any bullet could. He turned to look at her, really look at her, as if seeing something he didn't believe could exist anymore. Before he could speak, the sound of footsteps crunched outside. Elena froze. Leon's hand moved instantly to his gun. The firelight flickered across his face as he raised a finger to his lips, signaling silence. The door creaked slightly, the shadow of movement visible beneath the gap. Elena's pulse thundered in her chest. She could hear the faint click of a weapon outside, more than one. Leon's jaw tightened. "They found us," he mouthed. But this time there was no fear in his eyes, only fury. He reached for a knife strapped to his boot and whispered, "Stay behind me. No matter what happens." Elena's hand found his arm, gripping it tightly. We faced them together. The door shuddered once, then again, and then it burst open. Wood splintered and scattered as the door slammed open, striking the cabin wall with a deafening crack. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of metal, sweat, and gunpowder. Figures flooded through the doorway. Men in black, faces hard beneath masks, rifles raised. Leon reacted before thought could form. In one swift motion, he pulled Elena down behind the table and fired 3 shots toward the entrance. 2 men dropped instantly, the third ducking behind the doorframe as bullets tore through the wooden walls. "Stay low," Leon barked, his voice sharp, commanding. Elena's heart pounded so fast it hurt. The room erupted in chaos, the roar of gunfire, the crash of glass, the sting of smoke and dust. She pressed her palms to her ears, trembling before forcing herself to move. Her gaze darted to the corner, a small metal pipe on the ground, broken and rusted but heavy. She grabbed it. Leon reloaded with one hand, blood staining his fingers. His wound had reopened, the dark crimson spreading across his side. He glanced at her, eyes burning with that familiar, terrifying intensity. "When I say run," he said, "you go through the back. I'm not leaving you." He almost smiled even now. "You never listen, do you?" A burst of bullets shattered the window, glass raining across the floor. Leon ducked and rolled, firing again. His movements swift despite his injuries. He hit another man, then another. But more kept coming. They weren't ordinary thugs. These were trained men, relentless and cold. One of them kicked the door open wider and tossed something inside. Leon's instincts screamed. He lunged for Elena, dragging her down just as the grenade went off. The explosion was deafening. The force threw them both backward, crashing into the far wall. The air filled with smoke and splinters. Elena's ears rang, her vision blurred. She tasted blood. "Leon!" she gasped, crawling toward him. He was on his knees, coughing, his gun lost somewhere in the wreckage. She grabbed his arm, trying to pull him up. "I'm fine," he grunted, though his voice betrayed him. "Just go." Before she could answer, a shadow loomed through the smoke, tall, broad, moving with quiet menace. The man stepped into the flickering light, his gloved hand holding a pistol steady, aimed straight at Leon's chest. "End of the road, boss," the man said coldly. Leon looked up, blood dripping from his lip. "You should have aimed faster." Before the man could react, Leon snatched a shard of glass from the floor and hurled it, striking him across the face. The attacker staggered back, cursing. Elena swung the metal pipe with all her strength, connecting it with his wrist. The gun fell. Leon lunged, catching the man by the collar, and slammed him into the wall so hard the wood cracked. The struggle was brutal. Fists, elbows, raw survival. The man drew a knife, slashing wildly. Leon twisted, but the blade cut across his shoulder. "Elena!" he shouted. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the fallen gun and fired once. The shot hit the man square in the chest. He crumpled instantly, collapsing between them. Silence. Smoke hung thick in the air. Elena stared at the body, her hands shaking. The gun felt impossibly heavy. I killed him," she whispered. Leon's voice was rough but steady. "You saved me." He took the weapon from her trembling grip, his fingers brushing hers. "Look at me," he said. "Breathe." She met his eyes, steady, dark, grounding. For a moment, everything outside that ruined cabin faded. Then faintly came more voices, more footsteps. They were surrounding the cabin now. Leon turned toward the back door. "We have to move. There's a ravine about half a mile east. If we can reach it, we disappear." He pulled her with him, stumbling through the broken doorway into the forest once more. The sunlight had brightened, but the world felt colder. Every sound was sharper, the rustle of leaves, the distant shouts of men. They ran. Branches whipped against their faces, roots clawed at their feet, but neither stopped. Leon's breath came ragged now. Every step sent blood dripping down his side. Still he pushed forward, gripping her hand tightly, refusing to let go. At last they broke through the trees. Ahead lay the ravine, deep and jagged, a river roaring violently below. Leon looked down at it, then at her. "It's the only way." Elena stared wide-eyed. "You can't be serious." "That drop. Better than a bullet," he said. Behind them, gunfire cracked through the forest. Bullets tore into bark, kicking up splinters. Leon turned to her, his expression fierce but calm. "Trust me." She nodded without hesitation this time. "On 3, he said. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. He pulled her into his arms and leapt. The wind roared past them, tearing at their clothes and hair. The world spun in a blur of green and blue. Then the crash of cold water. It swallowed them whole. The river dragged them under instantly. The current was savage, hurling them against rocks, spinning them into the darkness. Elena's lungs screamed. She reached out blindly, searching for him, and felt his hand catch hers. They broke the surface together, gasping, the roar of water filling their ears. Leon's grip never loosened as the river carried them downstream. Minutes, or maybe hours later, the current began to slow. They drifted toward the edge of a quiet bank, both barely conscious. Leon pulled her onto the sand and collapsed beside her. Elena coughed, choking on river water, then turned to him. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. She pressed her hand against his wound. It was worse now, the blood mixing with water. "Leon," she cried. "Stay with me." He opened his eyes weakly, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "You're impossible to kill, you know that?" "Don't joke," she snapped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're losing too much blood." He reached up, brushing her hair back, his fingers trembling. "You're crying again. Because you won't stop bleeding." He chuckled softly, wincing at the pain. "I told you. I've had worse." "Stop saying that," she whispered. "You're not invincible." He met her gaze, his hand still resting against her cheek. "No. But maybe you make me feel like I am." The words hit her harder than any confession. Her heart twisted, fear, love, desperation all tangled together. "You're not dying here," she said fiercely. "Not now." He smirked faintly. "You always get what you want, don't you?" She leaned closer, her voice trembling. "Only when it's you." His eyes softened, and for the first time his guard completely dropped. His fingers curled weakly around hers. "Elena," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "If I don't make it, you will." "Listen," he insisted. "If I don't, there's a man named Arson. He runs my communications. Find him. He'll protect you. He owes me everything." She shook her head violently. "Stop talking like that." But Leon's breathing grew heavier, slower. His eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. "Leon," she cried, gripping his face between her hands. "Look at me. You're not leaving me here." His lips parted, barely a breath escaping. "I told you. You should have walked away." "And I told you," she whispered through tears. "I never will." The forest around them was still now, the river whispering softly in the distance. Elena pressed her forehead against his, her tears falling onto his skin. "Please," she breathed, "don't you dare die on me." But his eyes were already closing. The world around her blurred, turning into colors of gray and gold as the sun broke through the canopy above. Elena's hands were trembling, slick with water and blood. Her breath shallow from the cold and fear clawing at her chest. Leon lay motionless in her arms, his pulse faint, his skin pale beneath the morning light. The sight tore through her heart like glass. She pressed her palms against his wound again, desperate to keep the warmth from leaving his body. "Leon, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You can't leave me. Not like this." The forest was still. The only sound was the river's soft murmur, indifferent to her pain. She shook him gently, then harder. "Look at me. You promised we'd run together." Her words hung in the air, swallowed by the silence. Then, faintly, a breath escaped his lips. Shallow, fragile, but real. Elena froze, eyes widening. "Leon." His eyelids fluttered open. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. "You really don't give up, do you?" Tears spilled down her face as a half-laugh, half-sob escaped her. "You scared me to death." He tried to smirk, but the pain was too much. "Guess I'm still harder to kill than I look." "Shut up," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Just breathe. That's all you need to do right now. Breathe." He obeyed, each inhale shallow but growing steadier. She tore off the last strip of fabric from her skirt and tightened it around his side, her fingers trembling but precise. The blood slowed. He winced but didn't pull away. When she looked into his eyes again, something was different. The defiance was still there, but beneath it, a strange calm, like a man who'd finally stopped running from himself. "Elena," he murmured. "If I don't make it out of this world, I want to remember this. You, the river, the light." Her throat ached. "You're talking like it's over." He reached up, brushing his thumb across her cheek, leaving a streak of crimson. "It's not," he said softly. "Not if you're here." For a moment, the chaos and death that had followed them disappeared. There was only the rhythm of their breathing and the warmth of the morning sun on their faces. Then, faintly, a distant rumble broke the peace. Elena's head snapped up. The sound was too steady, too heavy. Engines. Multiple. Her stomach turned cold. "They're still coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Leon's hand tightened weakly around hers. "They won't stop. Then neither will we." He tried to sit up, but pain ripped through his body. Elena caught him, her arms firm around his shoulders. "You can't fight like this." "Don't need to," he said through clenched teeth. "We just need to disappear." He nodded toward the far side of the river, a narrow trail winding up the slope, hidden by overgrown brush. "There's an old hunter's road up there. If we reach it, they'll lose the scent." She looked at him, torn between fear and determination. "Can you walk?" He gave a faint smile. "With you. Always." She helped him up, his arm over her shoulders, his weight pressing into her. Each step was agony for him, but he refused to let her carry more than she had to. They climbed slowly, the sound of engines growing louder behind them. When they reached the top of the slope, Elena turned back. Through the trees she could see them, black SUVs moving along the riverside, men spreading out, rifles glinting in the sun. Leon followed her gaze. His jaw tightened. "They won't stop until one of us is dead." "Then let them die trying," she said coldly. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something like pride flickered in his eyes. "You were never meant for this life," he murmured. She met his gaze steadily. "Then maybe it was meant for me." They turned and kept moving. The forest grew thicker, darker. Leon's steps grew slower, but every time he faltered, Elena whispered, "One more step. Just one more." Finally, through the trees they saw it, an abandoned stone chapel, half swallowed by vines. Its roof was broken, its bell long gone, but it stood tall, ancient and quiet. Leon's breath hitched. "I remember this place," he said. "My father used to bring me here. Said even devils need a place to pray." Elena helped him inside. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of earth and old wood. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the roof, casting rays across the cracked floor. Leon collapsed against a pillar, his strength nearly gone. She knelt beside him, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. "You're safe now," she whispered. He gave a faint, broken laugh. "Safe is not really my thing." "You'll learn," she said, "when this is over." He looked up at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart stop. "If I survive this," he said quietly, "I'm done. No more wars. No more blood. Just you." She didn't answer with words. She leaned in and kissed him, slow, tender, filled with everything they'd lost and everything they still had left to fight for. His hand came up to the back of her neck, holding her close as if she were the only thing tethering him to life. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his. "Then promise me," she whispered. "Promise you'll come back to me." "I promise," he breathed. A sound outside made them both freeze, the soft crunch of footsteps, too deliberate to be wind or animals. Elena's heart stopped. Leon's expression hardened again. He reached for his gun, but she caught his hand. "No," she said softly. "Let me." He looked at her, uncertain. She stood slowly, her body trembling but her eyes fierce. The sunlight cut across her face, making her look almost otherworldly. Fragile, yet unbreakable. She walked to the doorway and peered outside. A single man stood there. Older, gray at the temples, dressed in black. He held his weapon loosely, not aiming, just watching. "Elena," Leon whispered behind her. "Get back." But the man didn't raise his gun. Instead, he spoke in a deep, weary voice. "He doesn't belong to them anymore." Elena blinked. "Who are you?" The man's eyes shifted to Leon. "A debt collector," he said simply. "And my debt's paid." Then, without another word, he turned and vanished into the forest. Elena turned back to Leon, confused. But Leon only smiled faintly. His voice barely audible. "That was arson." "You mean?" "He found us first," Leon said, his eyes closing as relief finally claimed him. "Guess we're not alone after all." She lowered beside him again, her fingers entwined with his. His breathing steadied. The danger had not vanished, but for the first time there was hope. Fragile, flickering but real. Outside, the sun rose higher, painting the chapel in gold. Elena leaned into him, her voice soft as the wind. "Maybe this is what it means to survive," she said. Leon smiled weakly, eyes half closed. "No," he murmured. "This is what it means to live." And for a long, beautiful moment, the hunted found peace. Two broken souls against a world that never forgave, wrapped in the quiet promise that even in darkness, love could still be the light that refused to die.